All right, hello everyone. Today we're going to talk about the top 8 decks, dark side and light side, for the Premier Death Star 2 Retro Online Championship Series we had last year around December of 2025. And before we go into that, I did want to give an update on how we're doing with 2 tournaments I'm hosting. So the 2026 Retro GEMPC, um, that is still being planned. It'll be here in about a month. I cleaned up this form. We have 15 people respond so far. Thank you. If you're thinking about registering, please do so as early as possible. I cleaned this up a little bit, like I said. I added some more of the details about prizes and whatnot here directly, and I kind of give a link to the forum post. Originally, I asked for a couple more things here, so I'm asking just kind of the bare bones here. If you do win a prize, I will contact you later and get your information so I can get those to you. But just give me this information here. This should be enough. And if there's other feedback you have, please let me know in this video or via email on this form, whatever is easiest for you. And so after this, we're also having the Retro Jawa Championship, the Premier Death Star 2 Java. And I talked about this in our previous video, but again, register for this one as well, please. I give the details as well here. And again, it's just a very, very simple format to register. And again, if you do win or you get a random participation prize, I'll contact you and we will figure that out. The forum posts themselves are a little bit more detailed. I do kind of go into like how differential works a little bit more just to make it easier. I know some details. For the most part, guys, just show up, play, have fun. You guys don't need to worry about it, and we should be good. So without further ado, let's talk about our main subject today, and let's talk about the decks that we had last year. So if you look at what was played, there's always just a few archetypes that get played for dark side. So this is kind of what was played some of last year. If you look at the actual decks that were just the ROCS, it was those. From last year, I mean, we had Bring Before Me, we had ROPS, and we have Set Your Course for Alderaan as the main decks. There were a couple people who played in the Retro GEMPC 2025 last year. One of them played Court, and another one played Hunt Down. Close to the top, there's a couple other decks streamed between there, but as far as like competitive players, this is what they tended to play. So the Retro Online Championship Series, we'll go over those here. So basically, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 people played ROPS, basically. And so this is Andy's deck. And what's interesting about his is he has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 ships. You don't usually see that many ships. It is nice. And I guess what I'd say is different about him is that he's doing both Rendili and Karita. And the nice thing about this is that when you're using mobilization points, if you happen to, like, let's say, have Rendili in your hand, you can get Karita, or if you get Karita in your hand, you can get Rendili. And of course, he had Core Lag. I think, though, that you can't actually get Core Lag directly in your hand. So it's another foresight. Usually, the light side uses this. Core Lag, there are some Core Lag operatives, but you don't see that here. So he has a few more systems than normal, which is interesting. I'm not necessarily convinced you need some more. There are some other players, they'll do things like Wakilumi there just to avoid giving your opponent more force, or they'll do things like Coruscant to try to annoy the opponent here, basically, right? That way, like if they have a light side Coruscant, it's very good to convert your opponent's light side Coruscant, in other words. So hidden base, they only have a few systems where they can actually drain for 3. So this is a system they can drain for 3. And Kessel is a system they can drain for 3. And Kifix is a system that can drain for 2 for the light side. So because whenever ROPS flips, their force drains are -1, you really need to be at a location where you can at least drain for 2, so that 2 minus 1 is at least you're draining for 1. Now, of course, Andy's using Imperial Decree, which means if he controls 2 Rebel base locations, which he doesn't really have here, or one planet side and two systems revolution is, canceled effectively, and the force drain bonuses. So the idea here is that if a opponent occupies Kessel, and they're trying to force drain, well, it's going to be -1. So it would be down from a drain of 3 to -2. But because in Imperial Decree they have no bonuses, so this +1 force drain goes away. So a drain of 3 to a drain of 1 if Decree is out and you flip ROP. So it's really devastating. And Kivx would be -1. There's no bonuses here. And the bonuses here effectively would also be down. So it would be a drain of 3 to a drain of 1. But if you had Coruscant, because bear in mind, you just have to control a system. It doesn't say battleground system, it just says system. And so one of the advantages of things like Decree is that, sites that are not battlegrounds, like if you control Raltier, if you control Wakulumi, you could even put the Death Star if you wanted to. There are a few decks in Premier Cloud City Modified, which they use Death Star to occupy. I think it'd be a little bit risky in this deck to put the Death Star there, although the 3 icons is nice. It could probably blow back at you hard. But anyway, he's very focused in his version to getting Decree going. He has no advisor, so he has to really draw a Decree and get it. He has 2 Emperors. An Emperor is nice for the personal shuttle. He has 2 Vaders. Vader is nice for his shuttle. And it moves for free. And if you happen to have Vader in there, it could be better. So he has some ways to annoy you in space. Only thing I would say, of course, is all right. He has, a +1 Battle Destiny from Houndstooth. He has Dengar. Dengar is a little bit annoying for ROPS because you really want to satisfy your objective, and you get, +1 the Battle Destiny for each relative location Imperial occupies. So you cannot put an Imperial pilot here normally. Now I know there's a card where you could like eject him and then, or come with me, you could put him in there, but generally speaking, that makes it difficult to do. So practically speaking, you don't really have as many ships as you might like to have for the purpose of doing your objective. Like, this is just a good way to frustrate the opponent here. He does have 1 masterful move to get Monarch. I would note that, of course, he does not have Cannot Hide Forever. He is vulnerable to numbers here. He does have resistance, though, and it is fairly common for the ROPS to be able to occupy 3 sites. They can usually do it fairly quickly, so the chance of being kind of numbered is relatively low, and resistance is also usually pretty good against anger, fear, aggression, and you can see that he is well positioned to kind of avoid either view resistance and or projected telepathy. He has 2 of them. 2 barriers seems fairly good. And he has kind of 2 the 3 of the classic guys deploy for free. He deploys for 0, and he deploys for -2 or free, effectively, to Docking Bay. And he has the protection of Point Man against the kind of the most egregious example, which would be Order to Engage. So overall, I think it's probably a solid ROPS implementation. Simalu is definitely annoying, being able to add with Drain. So it seems like it's, probably competitive, probably difficult. Mostly standard ROPS. Alter would be good to cancel Sense or annoying dark side things. But yeah, you want to be able to react if you want to, react as you want to, and being able to cancel a Sense would be helpful too. So yeah, overall probably good. Brad, playing ROPS again. He added a card from last year. It looks like he added Kuat. What's the nice thing about Kuat? Well, Kuat means that if it's with Wakulumi, it means they give you extra force bonuses. He does not have Decree. He also does not have Evader. So I know at one point he had Evader. So this particular version of his deck is vulnerable to Revolution. And Revolution could frustrate this deck potentially. You could kind of flip Wakulumi and get most of the benefit for yourself. I think it's interesting he has kind of Coruscant and Kuat and Wakulumi and Kashyyyk, although Kashyyyk is a staple for him. I think it's just a little weird because you don't have Decree personally, but he wants the activation. Executor Docking Bay and kind of three sites for him. At one point he did have the desert or the dark side, what he had at one point. And the desert can be good because you can threaten sandstorm basically. Because what typically happens is that you'll have Luke Jedi Knight. Well, I guess he's not a dark side card. You'll have Luke Jedi Knight. He will transit to the docking bay, and then if right outside the docking bay of a desert, you can threaten to sand roll, right? So you can kind of frustrate kind of their um, going inside. Now he didn't do that this time. It looks like he was heavily expecting a lot of its worses, and with this card, which means he was expecting it could be worse from the opponent. And if you have an it's worse and your opponent uses it could be worse, especially at the beginning of your turn, it can be a very quick GG. Interestingly, to see his deck, he does not have a resistance. Interestingly enough, and so, but he does have a cannot hide forever. So he could be vulnerable if you get past his protective telepathies. Let's say you grab them, push on us. If you kind of grab this one, so Brad's own deck had 4 anger, fear, aggressions. So if you had 4 anger, fear, aggressions, maybe you could potentially punch through here. If you had a sense in your hand, it could potentially punch through your projected telepathy. That being said, he does have 2 altars, so he seems fairly reasonably protected. Security precautions, good against hidden base, uncovering it. He only has 1, 2, 3 locations, it looks like, unless I missed something here. I'm just curious here if I missed it. Make sure I didn't delete it by mistake. We don't want to delete things at all. And just a note, I do have 50 million decks. I have 50 million decks, and it can slow everything down. Open this again. Yeah, okay, he has 4. So he has 4, he had Boba, and he had 2 Dreadnoughts. So if he only wants to have 4, it does make sense to have security precautions. Given that he has 3 Emperors, I honestly think that I think it would be cool to have, an Emperor's personal shuttle, just so you have the opportunity to have extra battle vests in there. So right now, he seems very vulnerable in space to me. And I think the major issue with that is that if you have someone that uses clouds, then you can do a clouds on Raltier, and basically he only has 2 ships that can go to the clouds. And I think if you have a cloud crew, you should be able to occupy the clouds and then occupy Raltier. Where's Raltier? Raltier's here, and probably cancel them. So I think it's good. I think he's going more heavily overseeing personally. Obviously, he was teching against could be worse, a little bit harder. He has some of the standard ROPS guys. He seems a little bit light on guys to me, honestly, although I guess he has 4 ATSDs. A little bit light. He seems to be a little bit stronger on tech this game. So I think it's a little more vulnerable. The past bad feeling have I does make it more difficult. So I'd have to see about this. I still think it's powerful, but yeah, I think it's a little bit light compared to some traditional ROPS. Have to see. However, saying personally, if you can get it over with, can be good. Then we have kind of Matthew Fence version. I do love having 3 ATSD pilots. I think one of the best things about ROPS is being able to deploy these non-unique Imperials, and having enough ATSTs to be a pilot here and do their jobs, I think is a big deal. Destiny 3, decently good enough. Ability, classic Dylan staple that he's adopted here as well. Overseeing personally, I do think that's a good counter use. He still loves his 2 Emperors, 2 Palpatines. If you're doing Force Lightning, yeah, it makes sense. If you're doing Overseeing, yeah, it makes sense to do that. Just as Vader's personal shuttle, I will say it is nice to just be able to deploy this for 1 at the spaceport docking bay and go up. He does have jungle, which I heavily prove for, in my opinion. If you are playing ATSTs, you probably want to use the jungle. Getting a -2 to attrition is a big deal for your opponent. It can really hurt them. And yeah, I think as far as that kind of selection is solid here. Uh, Bad feeling about high, pretty good. Resistance, yes, very standard. I would say this particular deck seems a little bit vulnerable to retrieval. So like there is no come here, you big coward. There's no coward here. There's no secret plans here. I think a retrieval deck, a focused retrieval deck would potentially be able to push through and make his day hard. I think the same thing with Kippel's deck. I think he has 1, 2, 3 spaceships. I think a clouds would also. Um, I think a clouds would also be trouble for his particular deck. I think that would potentially hurt him, but it's still Rops. Rops is still nasty. He still has the altars. He has, can I type forever to protect against numbers. He has resistance too, so and he has projected telepathy. So I think he's triple protected from those kind of items here. He has point man for, order to engage, and I think overall it's fairly solid. I do think the ATST ROPS is very powerful. Having additional spy is very helpful because later in the game you do want to be able to attack your opponent. Sarkly being an anti operatives is a good thing to have, but just being able to deploy Sarkly and then like Vader and surprise your opponent and kind of take the action back to them, I think is also a good thing, especially because you have these bonuses to Battle Destiny. You want to be able to deploy and attack, and that's a big deal. So I think this is good too. So Dylan's troopers. I think the Germans love troopers. Bastion loves troopers, and so does Dylan. It is a good deck. Dark 244 likes it too. Very fast. So this is another version where he's played before. 2 trooper assaults, 1 tactical support. He has plenty of guys to choose from. He does have 1 singular biker scout trooper. You can deploy that via your objective. And then because he's there, he can deploy his speeder bike there. And therefore, if any trooper, whether it's him or it's another one, could use high speed tactics to add a battle destiny. So that is generally pretty good. There is no try, can be good against sense and whatnot. He has no altars, he has no control, so he kind of has to punish them for their. He does not have resistance, but he does have can hide forever, which makes sense. He does have 1 personal weapon, but you want this for numbers protection, generally speaking. It's kind of important. And he actually doesn't have any grabbers. So yeah, I think he would start with Imperial Arrest Order. He'd start with mobilization points. And probably there is no try, but if he was afraid of numbers, he'd start Cannot Hide Forever, most likely. He does have security precautions, so if he facing a base, he might start this, drop it, and then do security precautions. He is famous for having multiple masterful moves, and this one is interesting because he has 2 Gicks. So I don't usually see 2 Gicks for this, and he's famous for having a Jabba the Hutt in his ROPS deck. So it's a decent option for if you are fighting against Prophet. And against Prophet, you get to start with 2 aliens. And so the nice thing about the audience chamber is that the light side version of the audience chamber is saying your alien leaders here are immune to attrition. So he's immune to attrition less than 4. All of a sudden, he's immune to all attrition, actually, as an alien leader. So I'm going to make a guess in his deck he's deploying Mara and Jabba the Hutt together. I'm going to guess, or maybe just Jabba. And he's just trying to delay Prophet from just harassing and doing ping damage. And if they really kind of do an overblown, because what sometimes Prophet does is they like to deploy Master Luke. We'll get the correct Master Luke here. They love to do Master Luke and giving him, Luke's lightsaber. And they love doing kind of like a Ben Kenobi 2. And, they might have, Obi-Wan's lightsaber. And, they like to kind of like add, Leia, blaster rifle, and they like to add, someone who loves you. So, in other words, they just try to deploy a bunch of guys all at once, free Han all at once, and they really they really try to get 50 million Battle Destiny as quickly as they can. And so it can be very overwhelming. And profit players love to do this. The only flaw I would say is if Dylan's planning to do this, of course, is that not every profit player does this, but you can naturally play Beggar at Jabba's Palace. And if you play Beggar at Jabba's Palace, and you have Draw Their Fire, your poor alien there by himself can be very vulnerable to getting screwed. So that's the main point. If you deploy Jabba and you expect to be ganked like hard, then you probably need to start deploying some more guys from ROP. So um, overall, I think though it's a good deck. It's a powerful deck. He keeps playing it, so obviously it must be effective. If you get kind of your two Death Star troopers together, or if you get two of the three of your Endor troopers together, you can extra Battle Destiny and cancel theirs. He has a couple extra of Biker Scout troopers as well. He has evacs for free. He has Sarkly, which is good. Anti-operatives, but just a spy, which is very helpful. And yeah, I think overall solid deck choices. Very frustrating to play against. He does have Evader. He does have some protection against Revolution, and yeah, he can overwhelm with Trooper Assault if you're not careful. So yeah, seems like an overall solid deck. I think he's a little bit better at defending Raltier if they have clouds. If you'll notice, all of these are starships or they deploy as starships. So if Lightside does use clouds, I think this deck is a little bit stronger, a little bit more defensible. Granted, of course, the purpose of this deck is to deploy quickly, right? You want to deploy quickly, you want to do it quickly. And that's kind of why you have things like, this ATST. That's why you have this one. And he always loves Scoutsman move. Here's a react. Well, he has lots of biker scouts. He's done that before. But you have things where you mitigate your damage or you prevent them from battling, or you do projected telepathy. Although he has only one, you can still frustrate the opponent here. So yeah, I still think overall, I think it's a good, tough matchup here. All right, so I'll admit I'm a little bit surprised. I mean, ROPS is overall an easier deck to play. I would say most decks, most games go the same way. Like the thinking you have to do is generally lower than I would say Bragnus is. I would say though that Bragnus really is like the final boss of PDS2 in my mind. He is very hard to beat whenever you kind of twirl yourself down. And so, yeah, I'm really glad that Joe and PMJ both played this deck archetype the last year. We kind of got to officially see a lot of their deck versions here. Um, I do personally like Joe's version a little bit more, and the reason why I say that is because uh, you you want to be able to defend against multiple things. So one thing I've seen Joe do recently is use Dengar with Blaster Carbine. Well, why is that? Well, it's because speeders are getting more popular. And against speeders, you have limited ways to hit them. Why is that? Well, because there's a vehicle, right? So Darth Vader's lightsaber, he targets a character or a creature for free. He doesn't target vehicles. And so you have kind of three main non-unique vehicles to use. And sometimes you do have things like the rogue vehicles. So like you might see Rogue One, you might see Rogue 3 with Wedge, and then you'll get things like Wedge Antilles, Red Squadron leader. He'll get inside a rogue speeder, and then he'll have like a buddy. The buddy could be it could be anything. I mean, the buddy could be Ketwall. The buddy could be Blount. The buddy could be all sorts. Pretty much anyone. I mean, the guy could be Han with blaster pistol. I mean, it could be almost anyone, and then he's able to cancel Battle Destiny. Well, if you're at a site and all you have there is like, let's just say Vader, well, Vader can't hit you inside the vehicle. And you have cards like IG-8. Well, IG-8 targets characters or creatures. He targets character creatures. And so the one nice thing about Dengar is he gets to shoot twice and he can shoot at speeders. And so if you have high enough destiny, you can track that somehow, and you should be able to get good enough destiny with, say, Course for Alder and Bragnus. You have some counterplay. And we'll go over the light side decks later, but this makes a difference. And You'll notice one thing about Bragness, we had another video about this, is that they love to just track their destinies. The main thing they do is they use Janus, and you'll put a destiny that you want to track later, and then you'll make it pop up at a different point. So let's say you know your opponent has like a Han with blaster pistol, or you know your opponent has like an Obi-Wan out. Well, what do you do? Well, you could use Janus to put one of your Death Star docking bays somewhere, at the bottom of your deck, or you could even use Ozzel. And then later when that comes up, you would use an overload. And then when that happens, you kill this person off by drawing a 1. You would use Brangus to switch out those cards again, switch out docking bay from hand, and then you would be able to get overload again, and you could potentially like overload someone a second time, within the short distances. You do the same thing for things like Force Lightning. You could Force Lightning someone at the end of their turn, and then on your turn, it's really good for things like Monarch. You could Monarch twice. So being able to get these lost interrupts, get them again, like you countersalt and then you could countersalt again. It's just really devastating, right? Being able to like reuse controls and whatnot. And then what you want to do basically is that once you have, switched out your docking bay and you have the docking bay at the bottom, well, you want to start a battle. So you'll use First Strike to start a battle, and then immediately your docking bay goes back. And then you will particularly abuse this with CNR Fleet Systems and Emperor Sword and Shield, because you want to deploy these and have them die, basically. You deploy them, have them die, switch them out with Brangus again, and then you deploy them again. So again, I won't go too much more about this, but several games have shown kind of the abuse of Brangus, but it's very abusive. It's hard to deal with. And having Ozzel as both a free deploy to Blizzard 2, because let's be honest here, there's not a ton of force. You get 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, at most from this. An opponent could easily use something like strike planning, and they could easily make it so that you don't even get, the force from indoor here. So there's potential to be force choked a little bit, kind of. I mean, you're immune to revolution, but this, the base version of kind of the PMJ, how do we get in this mess, and Bastion pretty much too, is that you don't have a lot of force because you don't want a lot of cards to really frustrate the opponent and really make their life hard. And so having the excess docking bays to draw 0, in addition to having Ozzel, makes overload easier. And also there's times where you just don't have a lot of force. You just really do want to deploy Ozzel in order to have an extra person to forfeit or a different way to just draw Battle Destiny. It's really good. And having Dengar here to blow up, the speeders like talking to is good. You really do want to have IG8 with Riot Gun and Forlom, not just for the ground, but a lot of times in space, you face things like Home 1, which can have an extremely high immunity to attrition when Akbar's there. And you really do need to draw 2 Battle Destiny at least. You need to stack, purposefully your 6s and your 5s in order to draw 11, because often you need to get rid of Akbar, right? You got to get rid of Akbar, and you got to get rid of, like First Officer, the NSB, and you have a lot of forfeit to go through, right? So, ideally you would, you'd have 11 or more, 13, that way you get rid of a few people and you can kind of eliminate Home 1 from existence. But yeah, the only way to really get rid of ships like Home 1 is you need high destinies, and these guys are very important, and that's why you will see in pretty much all Bragnus decks, you'll see Blastor controls, which is here too, right? Because being being barriered sucks. Now, one weakness this deck does have, and he tries to overcome with Gravity Shadow. One weakness is he doesn't have, Rebels won't escape us. And that's not a light side card, that's a dark side card. Yeah. So the issue is that Hyperscape could be used for this one, or a Landing Claw could be used for Bosk. Now, to be fair, he does try to, get rid of this one with Tarkin's orders, which is not, it's not a terrible thing. I think it's still good. Obviously, the Destiny is a little bit better. They are a little vulnerable if they deploy Bosk. They have no defense against Landing Claw. One issue with this deck type is that it's very much about I'm going to sit and drain you at Endor, or I'm going to sabak you to death. So if the opponent doesn't deploy, to here, or they were able to get kind of like Bosk here or whatever, right? And you're able to get a landing claw there. And if you, let's say you grab, Trooper Sabak, let's say, push on us, you get them there. Then there's the potential to kind of disrupt them. You can kind of counter choke them. There are certain cards like Civil Disorder and Civil Disorder, there's not a ton of ability. I mean, okay, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 at most. So if you have a deck where you can deploy, 15 guys, and maybe you could minimize the damage you do here, like maybe you could do like, could be worse. Maybe you had some ability to like Rebel Fleet, or you had an ability to like, bargaining table or something, right? If you have ability to kind of disrupt their only drain there or landing claw, like we said, potentially a little slow here. Potentially you could disrupt this, or if you can kind of bait out their baiter, you could do something like controllable fury them and do some more ping damage. So probably a lot of the keys to beating Brangus is probably just out damaging them quicker or counter lock them and whatever. But again, this is a really tough deck to beat. This is a good version. I would also say that a lot of Bragnuses do use 3,720 to 1. It's a natural fit because you play numbers and then you use Brangus as soon as numbers hits to grab it back in your hand. You can deploy Brangus and the Emperor and Janus together and just do numbers. It is telling that in both Joe's deck and PMJ's deck, they did not use numbers, and they obviously felt that they wouldn't get away with it. And frankly, that probably makes sense. And I'm going to give you a preview, but if you notice that Dylan's light side version had insight, Dr. Torch's hidden base had insight, PMJ's deck had insight, this deck had insight, this deck had insight, this deck had insight, this deck had insight, and this deck had insight too. So just let you know that from the top 8 players, every single light side deck had insight serves you well. Now, it doesn't actually mean they would automatically play it. They might not play it. Like, I mean, Brad, he could have started with, staging areas and insurrection and do or do not, and maybe he would try to get insight later. But all of them had it in their deck, and of course, with his deck, maybe he would try to, the signal it quickly. So certainly not a guaranteed thing. I think in a regular kind of like retro league matches, you should expect to see numbers because it's simply so good. And if you don't have numbers protection, it's really dangerous here. So just beware. And I would say that I would say it's very hard to play this game without a grabber. If you're playing against Bragnus, you really need to try to save a grabber for Trooper Spock because they can easily use Janus combined with, Force Lightning and Masterful Move, or just arranging the deck in a smart way to get 11s with Sabak and then automatically whittle you down with Trooper Spock. So it can be very devastating to do that. They can drop all their cards. I will say one thing they used to have like more of a reactor terminal, and it looks like both Joe and PMJ got rid of the reactor terminal from the deck. I still think reactor terminal is really good because the idea behind Bragnus is you want to draw up all your cards and manipulate as you want. So I do remember several games with PMJ. PMJ would draw up so much of his hand, and I think especially for a new person, I think you might find, on all honesty, having a reactor terminal was helpful. I know it was helpful for me when I tried my versions of the deck. Is it strictly needed? Maybe not, but it is helpful, yes, to have reactor terminal and a Janus. I will 100% admit that it gives you some flexibility to do it. So again, comparing these two, I do like this one more. I do think it's more flexible. I do like that he has both an altar here. Does he have a control in this one? Oh, he does have a control. No, he doesn't have a. Where's the control? That's right here. Okay. I do like that he's an alter and a control. Control is very good against Kessel because a lot of light sides will like to use Kessel with what I mentioned before of home one, and then you can easily get a drain of 3 or 4 here if you do launching the assault. Um, that can be easy drain of 4. So having control to cancel it, get it back, start a battle later, give you a little bit more time is very, very powerful. So overall good. This, if you look at this deck, it has a very obvious anti-bias towards space. Why? Because, well, frankly, the space is one of the areas that's weakest. Space is one of the areas where a hidden base X-wing or either non-unique or unique can run roughshod. So they try very hard to make it so that you can't run away, or that if they wanted to get rid of you, they can set for stun. Like there's sometimes, frankly speaking, the only way to to really deal with Wedge is to set for stun him. Like literally set for stun, get him gone, goodbye. One interesting thing, of course, is these versions, they don't have a floating 7. So they're, I think Bastion's deck, he did do a Mournful Roar. Why a Mournful Roar? Well, simply because if you have a 7, you can trample Luke Skywalker Jedi Knight. Like you can trample like the most powerful version of Luke, in this game right here. And so that's an easy way to do it. You could trample him there as well. They could have done, circle is now complete. It looks like they were less worried about circling Obi-Wan. I guess they felt they could fight him otherwise, which I suppose is fine. But yeah, being able to do extra damage in base, not let people move, trying to cancel hyper escape is generally good. And this can cancel, could be worse too. So that also makes sense here. So yeah, no, I think overall it's a solid deck. I would say with PMJ's version, he really wants the Emperor out. So he had an extra Emperor kind of compared to I would say, what the norm is. He really wanted to put all sections on alert really, really, really bad. So he had an extra one kind of compared to the norm. Normally we'd have one Twilight Advisor. He's like, I really, really want 2 Twilight Advisors, which granted makes sense. Sometimes you do want to have your battle order or come here, be a coward, or you want to get security precautions easier. So I don't think that's bad necessarily. I would say that you know it comes with the cost of flexibility. I think this deck is not as flexible on the ground, and I think that's probably the disadvantage. So I would be more worried about this deck versus a speeder deck because I think this deck's ability to contain it is not as good. One thing PMJ does love is he does love his voyeur. He will try to bait you having voyeur. It is a very effective tactic. It is hard to let this go. So yeah, having voyeur and projective telepathy and like masterful move, and force lightning and control. It's very difficult. Like sometimes you may need to grab control. It is what it is just to get your kind of force drain there. So this is still a nasty deck. Still difficult. I will say in his defense that if you have a Grimtosh, there are points in time where one light side tactic is to Grimtosh you. And so if he had 2, in his hand, but only 1 in his deck, he could potentially save himself. If you are fighting against Brangus, Grimtosh is usually a good move because the dark side usually loves to grab 50 million cards, and sometimes getting rid of their key cards can be the key to you winning. I'll also say that aim high can also be really good. Why? Because aim high makes it so that they have to pay to retrieve. And so, it's hard. Like there's certain points in the game where you draw so many cards, whatever the board state is, you can't really afford to both deploy Emperor Sword and Shield and afford to retrieve at the same time. So these 2 cards can make a difference in your efforts. Generally speaking, you do not want to go to the docking bay unless you strongly think you can win, or like you fight Brangness and you do something like out of commission, right? So an early out of commission against Brangness can make a really big difference. They will probably grab it very quickly, but it could be the thing that's necessary that you kind of disrupt this deck. Could be. I haven't seen many people used it, but demotion on Mr. Janus can also be potentially effective because a lot of these decks, they rely on Janus, they rely on tracking destiny so that whenever they hide a card, they can grab it, or whenever they retrieve a card, they can grab it, and you can use this to kind of enable sabak as well. And so preventing them from kind of grabbing cards disrupts a lot of their advanced planning that doesn't really exist until Premier Death Star 2. So I do, my personal opinion is I think this one's a little bit better, more versatile, but they're certainly both powerful, nasty decks, and you have to be prepared. And a special prize, special credit goes to the person that beats Brangus against an experienced opponent, because these are difficult. All right, so Johnny Chu, Mr. Yellow, he did play his own version of Bring Before Me. This was an interesting deck. He made it to the finals. I didn't see all the games. Responsibility Command is a nasty card because you can put this on someone, so and they may be unable to get there. So if they can't get back to the home on war room, they're kind of stuck. And if they don't have an altar, or they don't have a way to get their guy killed, you can basically block them from doing stuff. Previous version, Johnny had 2 counter assaults, and maybe that's because he thought he was fighting Dylan or risk fighting Dylan or whatever. So maybe down to 1. He does have Bragness for the Trooper Sabak, which is still good. He can still do the kind of the Bragness playing Sabak with Janus, manipulating the deck. You can use Masterful Move combined with a Force Lightning in order to get an 11. Relatively easy to get them in a loop. Overload is kind of interesting. He only has 1. Well, I guess technically he has Hollow Table. Technically he has, 1 other docking bay. I would personally say there's no reason you can't use Death Star docking bay as well. Yes, it's not as efficient, but no reason why you can't just use this one here. So I think these are nice to flip as docking bays. But yeah, you could decide not to deploy the Executor one and use it. Well, I think it's a little bit curious, but I mean, Johnny's a world champion and he made it to the top of this tournament. So, what do I know? 3 Masterful Moves to grab 3 Daedrics. I think a little vulnerable to being grabbed, but I mean, Masterful Move is very powerful. I think Darkseid really needs a trackable 6 to deal with a lot of light side shenanigans. 2 projectile telepathies to deal with stuff. He does seem a little bit light with ships, so yeah, Executor can be annoying to deal with. It's not like he has a lot of pilots for this. I mean, I guess you could shift Brangus to go into Executor docking bay and going up to the Executor and fighting there if you absolutely had to, although you really want him at his site, I guess. These 2 guys together can, add Battle Destiny, extra Battle Destiny, which is good. Dengar can do stuff. So they have the ability to clear sites. It's just, there's not a lot of oomph here, generally speaking. So I think if you're fighting a hidden base deck, or fighting like a Wormtime kind of Clouds and base deck with, Wedge and Luke and whatever, I think you'd be a little bit in trouble potentially. But that being said, he does have potential to kind of frustrate. It looks like he's really trying to ping with Responsibility Command. Maybe he's waiting to deploy strategically. And maybe even if they have Wedge, he just deploys these cards and like, come get me. And so if you do try to alter it, he does have a sense, and he does have, oppressive enforcement. So maybe he just recycles it and gets it back later with Janus. And then he does, mean things to you, such as, what he did. I think in the tournament is that I think he's the one that used set for stun, or at least he has the potential. He can set for stun, let's say, a Han with Blaster Pistol. And it's not a Dark Side card. He used like a set for stun to Han during your control phase. So Track of Destiny, set for stun, Han to them, and then you can go Oneth immediately and kill them. So that's also a very mean, very devastating combo. I will note that Johnny does not have. Oh, does he have first strike? He does have first strike. Okay, so he has a little bit of ability to get a card back from his own volition. He did play 3,721. Not sure he got it off. Maybe he did. But yeah, no, I think 2 Emperors, 2 Vaders. I think obviously he's holding his Vader to the right time, but no, he got far. He got to the finals of this, so I'd say a sneaky deck. I think other people would. I think if you are playing this deck, you need to be really careful about who you're playing against. I think some decks that want to do as well, but yeah, no, Johnny did well. All right, so Dr. Torch has a few tie versions. There is a version of ties that does Talon Roll, for example. So there is a Talon Roll version of ties, and you would use kind of like I think is it Scythe? No, not Scythe. Yeah, it's the Scythe ones, and you could use the Scythe Squadron ties and Meanda to kind of do these ones. This is his Interceptor one. He does like this version, and I like it too. I was inspired by a similar deck played by InRabbit. Having Dreadful Imperial Starfleet, and being able to get it via Twilight Advisor does give you some time to cancel Battle Destinies and then kind of deploy and pounce on the opponent when you're ready. It's Dr. Torch, so he loves Reactive Terminal, so not surprised to see that there. He has Jabba and he has Boba. I'm going to assume this is mostly for profit. That's kind of a way to mitigate that. If that is the plan, I would always, remind you to be careful because Master Luke, if he gets lucky, he could try to use his ability, try to draw 5. And if he draws a 5, he could return Boba to hand. Sorry, not Boba. He could return Jabba to hand, but not Boba. And that could be a dangerous thing. That being said, if you do know Han's there or do know Jabba there, these two together could be extra Battle Destiny, which can make a big difference in some games. So, but yeah, control deck, and he has Executor Docking Bay, and he has Death Star 2 Docking Bay. And so often what you would do is you deploy Presence of the Force to one of these locations in order to snag a Luke and go over to the Emperor and start having fun because you can still Emperor's power while you are dueling with the objective and trying to make them lose force. And you have exactly 2 battlegrounds plus a potential third battleground with Presence of the Force to try to track your opponent. It's always tricky trying to satisfy Honor of the Jedi, and you have to sometimes be judicious. But yeah, I would say this can potentially be a frustrating deck. He also does Gravity Shadow to try to prevent you from moving as well. And he also has Targon's Order to try to dissuade you from it could be worsening or hyper escaping. And I guess that's better. And I guess because he doesn't have very many capital starships, he just has one. He is not super worried about the landing claw that we talked about earlier, which is fine, which is perfectly fine. And he knows playing Revolution himself that Revolution is dangerous, so he has Evader and a couple of senses and altars. So yeah, no, it seems like a solid package overall. It is light on characters simply by its nature. So another player playing this deck just probably needs to get some reps in to be careful. These high level decks, you just have to be careful. It is not designed for just randomly deploying your guys. Often the dark side has to wait and try to pounce on you in order to do their job. Notably, this deck does not have blast door controls, so its ability to stop a barrier on this particular version is actually better. And actually, this particular deck would be vulnerable, unlike some other ones, to Rebel Barrier. I will say because so many decks use blast door controls, it does make sense if a dark side occasionally might try to get away with not using it. So I do get that one. So that was the dark side decks. Again, there are really only 3 archetypes here. There was Bring It Before Me, Say a Course for Alderaan, and ROPS. Although granted, there are 2 versions of ROPS, the Troopers and the ATSTs. Yeah, so not a ton of deck diversity at the top. That's kind of just what it is, and that's one reason why we are trying to develop the PDS2 Java format. So let's go on to the light side one. So Dylan has been playing this deck for a while. He's been playing this for a couple of years here. I will be honest with you, I don't entirely know how he gets away with this one. Uh, he has 14 X-Wings, he has his locations. Although Johnny doesn't love it anymore, he does, like to do Haven. And the nice thing about Haven is it gets you extra Battle Destiny there. And so that works for Solist and Yavin 4. He doesn't have Hoth in this deck. But he's trying to stick to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 legitimate battleground systems. Losing another one would be really bad for him. And look, he has a tunnel vision, so he has adapted that. That's interesting to see. So yeah, he is trying to flip as quickly as he can, trying to mass drain you. He has a couple of guys here to fight on the ground if need be. He will have to pay for drains. Most opponents, they will have a battle order, this stage in the game. but he knows that, so he seems, generally speaking, willing to pay for it. A ROPS, sorry, a Bring Him Before Me deck could be trouble because they could force Luke to go there. You don't have Obi-Wan to fight. Obi-Wan could be circled, but it kind of is what it is at this point. He has civil disorder, so if he needed to hunker down a turtle, he could hunker down a turtle and just try to survive off of that. He does have It's a Hit, and he could use that to kind of cancel. So he could go to ROPS. It's a hit. He could occupy two of those four battlegrounds with his undercover spies, and he could potentially disrupt them and make their lives hard. So hidden base X-wings is a fun archetype to play. Do you see transmission terminated? Because in tournaments, for some reason, we see people playing Hunt Down. Right, Hunt Down shows up randomly at tournaments. If you're not prepared for it, it could hurt you. So it's nice to see him trying to counter that. Although no one at the ROCS last year played Hunt Down particularly. So overall good. Not much else I can say about it. We've talked about this several times on this channel. Hidden base mains, classic staple from Dr. Torch. Two revolutions, frustrating to play against because he gives you almost no force. You will use strike planning. So what he'll do is that he'll deploy like Endor, he'll deploy Clactor, he'll deploy Alderaan, and basically you get 0 force from these, and he'll get 2, 3, 4, 6 force from Home 1 at the same time. He'll deploy his two sites, Home 1 Docking Bay and Echo Docking Bay, and then he'll give exactly one battleground to you, and the rest of his game will be deploying to your sites and trying to give you a hard time. He is a big fan of Calfell Syndros and just denying you Battle Destiny while being able to use Ben Kenobi and a Saber and being able to sense you. And interestingly enough, there's no altar. Yeah, no altar in this deck. Interesting. He will use Smokescreen to get across and defeat Tarkin. He will use Aura to Engage to frustrate ROPS and force them to fight against you. And if you try to point man, he will try to countersense you. So it's a question of who has more senses or altars in their hands. He does have a control too to counter your altar. So he is prepared. He thinks that you will alter him, and he wants to control your altar. That's what he would do. Gimmer Stick combined with Aura to Engage can be very frustrating for ROPS because ROPS, as we talked about earlier, what does ROPS has is lots of tiny guys here. And tiny guys cannot fight with Gimmer Stick, which is a frustrating, annoying card. He does have Bit Shuffle to frustrate your Destiny tracking, can also be really good. And Out of Commission is a general overall good card as he has demonstrated. There are some versions of this deck where he has had multiple Out of Commissions. So he did used to play like 3 of these cards in one deck. I will admit that I myself have been diversifying a little bit more out of this deck here. Just something, that to do differently and whatnot. And because of Dr. Torch, of course, traffic control. So I would say generally this is a knowing deck. I think it's a little more prepared to fight. ROPS. Its drain potential is not the best. And it's a little bit vulnerable to things like overload. I think one issue, of course, is that the dark side could be trying to do like the Emperor's sword and the Emperor's shield, and they can deploy to the site too. So I think it's a little bit problematic potentially. I guess they can go to 2 sites and try to drain for 2. It just seems like a long, drawn-out game potentially against ROPS and Brangus. That being said, if he does get an advantage out, he can try to hide that warrior away and not let them be set for stun or whatever, and try to hide away so that they can do ping damage to Brangus, which could make a big difference. I might suggest potentially, although of course he only has 1 Cold Squadron, he only has 1 ship, but I think there's Falcon Red 5. Yeah, Legendary Starfighter. I think Legendary Starfighter is probably a way to frustrate Brangus. If you have a Falcon Red 5, that could really do some damage to them. And that might be the way to properly use Gold Squadron 1. That might make a big difference here, because there's a certain card that doesn't exist yet. Unsalvageable does not exist. And so what this card would do is that it would make an unpiloted card go away. But unsalvageable doesn't exist in Premier Death Star 2. And so you could have a Gold Squadron 1 with Legendary Starfighter, and it could do a lot of annoying damage to make Brangus defeated. In standard Dr. Torch and in Rabbit fashion, they love Double Beggar. I tell you what, they love Double Beggar. It is super annoying. I get it. It does have Draw Their Fire, so watch out. This man wants to pounce on you like crazy, and he will stack up his force, and he will try to make your life hard. And so, sitting at with Set Your Core for Alderaan, like we talked about earlier, just sitting at the Death Star docking bay, and because of the Texas objective, you take no battle damage. Your 4 strains of battle damage against you or cancel can make a big difference in kind of frustrating a Dr. Torch style deck. So just beware. I will say one thing, of course, is that having Rogue 3 with Wedge and another pilot can frustrate a deck like PMJ's Brightness. And I think this is another reason, because you can be locked out with Rogue 3, which is I think a reason why I think Joe's deck is better, because at least Joe has a counter to Rogue 3. Because this version of the deck doesn't as much, although I guess you could have IG8 and Forlom drawing extra Battle Destiny. It's just a little bit harder to get there. So anyway, let's go back to where we were, and let's move on. So PMJ played a version of this hidden base back in the GEMPC. I think overall solid, except for one thing. So if you look at kind of the deck he did have Alderaan here. So I think, I really think he should not have taken out this card. He used to have our most desperate hour in this card. And if you look at his deck, it's kind of primed for it, right? This guy's 4 ability, this guy's 4 ability, this guy's 6, this guy's 4 ability, this guy's, 4, 4, this guy's 3, 3, and this guy's 3. So, most desperate hour gives you a lot of retrieval at various locations, depending on those. And so, because if you're going to play Tatooine, it makes sense for you to play Alderaan and, just take advantage and just get yourself 50 million force. Clouds is very important against ROPS. It doesn't do a ton against other decks, but against ROPS it's very good. And if you have a laser cannon is a good sneaky way to get an opponent who is following you through to get there. 2 Rebel Barriers. I do like Rebel Barrier. It's hard for me to run 2 personally, simply because, like I said, Blast Door Controls is so important for Brangus, right? It's hard for Brangus not to use this card. That, oftentimes, it's a Destiny 4, but it's a dead card. It's important, it's good. I think it's problematic. He has two hyperscapes. I think there's one issue with that is there's a light side card which does a similar thing that helps you leave before the phase is gone. Let's see. Ship move. I forgot the name of it. There we go. Hit and run. I might suggest that you get rid of 1 hyperscape to do hit and run. Granted, this card sucks as far as Destiny goes. It's a loss. This one's used, but just the fact that you see both. You see Joe's deck. Really wanting to use Tarkin's orders. Well, notice what Tarkin's order doesn't get. This cancels hyperscape. This doesn't cancel hit and run. Right? It doesn't cancel. And you also notice, Rebels won't escape us. Won't escape us. This card cancels hyperscape. It does not cancel and run. And I guess that's another reason why Gravity Shadow is probably a decent card. Even though you have to draw a card to stop them from moving, and that's annoying. I think the very fact that Gravity Shadow will stop either hit and run or hyperscape or whatever, and potentially blows up the Destiny, blows up the pilot, is a good thing. I think that's helpful. One thing that is nice about this deck, of course, he has 3 senses and 2 altars. A lot of decks are not prepared to do the sense altar war, and this one does. This one does. And this deck can track Destiny. This deck has defense against URB, and it can also kind of steal a lightsaber from Lord Vader. And one thing that's fun, if you are facing Bring Him Before Me, right? What will often happen in Bring Him Before Me is they'll put Vader to site, so maybe they'll do like indoor docking bay, and they'll put Lord Vader there, right? Sometimes what you can do is if you have a site that's not next to a docking bay, you can just deploy from your deck via Bring Before Me to this battleground site, and you can just have have Luke in this particular case hang out. Now, if you look at kind of archetypes, I mean, nowadays usually Bring Before Me, they kind of like to do Cloud City docking bays for them. They'll use this one, and maybe they'll use Endor. Zutton, when he was playing, he did the Spaceport docking bay. Why did he do the Spaceport docking? Well, the Spaceport docking bay lets you get to most locations the light side might be hiding their Luke at. So I still think, generally speaking, the Spaceport docking bay is probably a good thing. In this particular case, if you have the Spaceport and you have Cloud City docking bay, you can kind of get to most locations. Because what's the danger for Luke hiding? Well, Luke hides in two places. He hides in the Tatooine, or he likes to hide in the Cloud City location. Let me grab it for you. He likes to hide in the one that has two icons, this one right here. So he likes to hide in the lower corridor, or he likes to hide in the cantina. And so if your Bring Before Me has East Platform and the Spaceport docking bay, you can hide from most places that matter to the light side. One exception, of course, would be something like Hoth. So if your light side wanted to hide like at third marker, you could not use Vader to go there. The difference is that if light side did go to here, then you would suddenly be vulnerable to stomach. Always think with your stomach. So it's nicer for light side to go to an interior site like this one or this one and to do there. I will say another nice thing though about having Tatooine in this deck is that because he does use, it's a hit, you can counter Force Drain a site-related system control, even though you can't drop from the Tatooine system directly to the Cantina. If for some reason like you deploy the Cantina and the opponent, beats you up and takes it over, you can just stay here and use this card, and you can kind of frustrate some of their ability to Force Drain you. So no, this deck, don't see it played very much. I do think it's a good version. I do think he needs like Our Most Desperate Hour, or he needs some version that kind of to take advantage of a few maneuvers, take away your high destiny. Normally I would like to see on the edge inside of the deck. And I think he just kind of like skipped a couple of potential defenses, I guess, or whatever. But that being said, if you're fighting ROPS, you may have to go in. Maybe you felt you had to go all in. It's hard to be in space and the ground. This deck does kind of weave a thread here. Battle plan is very important for this deck in particular. And that bit is nice. I guess I will say this deck's defense as well. Like, he does have two altars, so if he grabs an altar and he's able to cancel Bat Blaster controls, that could potentially help. So anyway, that's a good deck. You probably want some reps in it, but it has a lot of characters. So from a NARC perspective, it's good. You can judiciously deploy your clouds at the right time. You probably need to wait a little bit and deploy your guys with your matching pilot ships judiciously, and go from there. So I do like this version. I do like this version a little bit more than PMJ's, just because, yeah, it has sense, it has altar, it has barriers. These decks are very similar. I'm going to take a guess that they kind of took notes with each other. So in Andy's version, he decided, yeah, I'm going to have Alderaan. Yeah, I'm going to have Our Most Desperate Hour. And yeah, I'm going to have Tybran. And so what's the idea? Well, the idea here is that you will have a Rebel at Tatooine, and you will deploy this and then move them immediately to Alderaan. You will have 50 million guys deployed to the Cantina or inside their ships. And he has a couple of capital ships here that can help you, get guys just hanging out if the opponent doesn't give you good sites to go to. And then you'll have another ship at Tybran, where you will exchange 3 cards in hand for 1 card in your lost pile, and you will get Our Most Desperate Hour back into your hand. You'll have another Rebel at Tatooine, either the same one or a different one, and you will repeat this process. And so the idea is that you could have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13, 14, and this is going to be 15. So maximum of 15 force, you pay 3 to get it back. So you kind of net 12 across two things. And if they can't stop you in space, even if they're draining you for a ton, even if they're frustrating you, if they can't stop you in space, then it doesn't matter what they're doing on the ground. You know, if you're able to force drain a Kifex and Kessel, even if it's for 2 and 1 respectively, you can slowly whittle your opponent down away. So I like the control aspect of this deck. I love that it has Sense and Alter as a hidden base deck, which is harder to do, generally speaking. And I think I just like that it has some ground components. I like that it has Battle Plan as a light side. I think, you know, it has the potential to frustrate ROPS. I don't love that it doesn't have clouds. I think clouds, unfortunately, is very important to disrupt ROPS. I mean, maybe you can get away with it, but you know, generally speaking, having your force drains be penalized really sucks. And if you want to have someone at Tybran and they don't get to drain anything, that kind of sucks. And Tybran, of course, the opponent drains for 2. So I think, you know, it can be kind of frustrating to play this. I do think Wormtime's version of Hidden Base that he played earlier last year is probably better. But I do think that threatening the opponent with our most desperate hour is a good tactic. I do think Sense and Alter is a good tactic. And I think as long as you don't lose too many ships too early on, you can really frustrate the opponent, because you also notice he has Green Squadron 1, which he can deploy with Tycho. He has Tanta 4, which they can just deploy generally. So it is designed to pounce on a lazy dark side at Raw tier. So they might just have Dengar, right? They might just have Dengar there, or they might just have Vader's shuttle. And they can, if you can't draw Battle Destiny, he can really make this hard. And of course, even if you can, I'll take the leader could take you out. So it's obviously tight against ROPS without the clouds. I think versus Brangus, it does have potential. You could potentially sense it if you can get past their alter and control. You could potentially frustrate them. I will note here that in the past, I think PMJ's Brangus did have a Gick. Yeah, he has a Gick, and it looks like Joe's doesn't. And one thing that PMJ would do is he would like deploy his ties and attack you and lose. So I think in this particular case, the disadvantage for Andy's version is because it's so important to fight blast door controls. So very important that you're able to have a counter for this. Having only one altar, I think, makes it so it's very difficult for him to get past it. I could imagine that if these two decks were playing, maybe a scenario where he needs to give it 3 cards to get rid of altar to get his barrier. I don't know. Maybe that's unlikely, but I think Brangus still is very, very difficult to deal with. So we would have to see how that goes. But I think as an attempt to kind of counter the meta, I think this is decent. So this is what Matthew Fent did. He did a TRM deck. He did a TRM deck similar to what Brad Kipple does. He had 4 Anger for Your Aggressions. He has our 3 Fish Folk, 3 Mon Calamari. He has Home 1. He does have Launch in the Assault. What did he do differently? Well, he added a few senses here. He has no Obi-Wan. Oh, no, sorry, he has one Obi-Wan. He has Ben Kenobi. He has Ben Kenobi Saber. And I think it's a little weird to have Cantina just because normally I would like to put a site where the opponent can just walk over, but maybe it makes sense. I don't know. I think it's a little hard to have the Cantina like that because if you're facing against ROPS, maybe there, but maybe the Cantina is more against anti-Brangus. I don't know. I do think that he has the Beggar, frustrate the opponent, draw their fire. Gunite, make our deploy, order to engage, probably very, very necessary overall. A couple of tunnel visions, a couple of signals to get the cards you need out of your deck as quickly as possible. He does have a Kessel here. I think it's a little bit dangerous to go to Coruscant. Now, if you can go to Coruscant and you're not worried about the dark side Coruscant, if you're not worried about this card, sorry, this card right here, I think it's okay. What you don't want to happen is you deploy this Coruscant and then Joe or PMJ or someone else cancels your Coruscant, then you have a home one here is basically dead. Because if you have come here, you'd be a coward. It could be difficult. Like he'd have to occupy both those two sites or the Death Star docking bay, and that would be annoying, right? If you had to go here and they have Sacred Course for Alderaan. So I think it's a little bit dangerous. I think if you can get away with it, if you can just wait to deploy this card, great. But this deck is set up to deploy this as soon as possible, deploy home one there, put 50 million guys there, drain for 4, and make it hard for the opponent because you make their Imperial Starships deploy +2 and Gunite +2. So that's the goal. So I like the idea that it makes Starships deploy +2. I like the idea that if you were able to get that lock successfully, you could make the Emperor's Sword and Shield deploy more difficult. I don't like that a common tactic for a lot of dark side decks is to hold Coruscant. So I think this is a little risky move. And I think maybe he got converted during an actual game. I do like under attack if you can do it, if you can track your destiny. The only thing I don't like is what's his floating destiny? Maybe it's a 5, right? So the issue with this, of course, is like you have Blizzard 2, right? This is the most common one. Well, notice that it has armor of 8, right? So for under attack, you have to add 3 if you have a lightsaber. Okay, that's nice. So, but loss of total destiny greater than armor. So in order to get past this, you need to draw a 9, right? So if you're using under attack, you need to draw another 6 for the most common Blizzard that, if you remember what we're talking about, what do our Brangus decks do? They use Blizzard 2, right? That's the most common one. And so the issue I have under attack is I don't think it's going to work against the most common one. Like if you look at Blizzard 1, for instance, okay, Blizzard 1 has armor of 7. So if you have +3, okay, yeah, you could use the signal to get a 7. So I think with how he designed the deck currently, I think he needs a lot more 6s or 7s. I think maybe a deck where you had Baragwins. If you had a deck with Baragwins and you had a deck where you had like Bionic Hands or whatever, and you had a deck with Intruder missiles, I think you could potentially track your 7s, get 7s in your deck enough so that maybe you could use under attack. But with the way he's designed this deck, I don't think you'll ever be able to practically use this because Hoth Walker decks that don't use Blizzard 2 or use Blizzard 1 are very, very rare. I guess there is Tempest. There's Tempest Scout 1. It's fair to say against AT-ATs, this is very possible. I guess the reason I don't love this is that it's an anti-ROPS card, but it would be really nice if you made it so that it's an anti-Brangus card too. I guess that's my complaint. But yeah, it would, you could basically draw a 2, right? A 2, and then destroy a lot of these ATSTs. That would be good. So that's my thought with that. But yeah, Anger, Fear, Aggression is annoying. He's using Rogue 3, like kind of like how I did in my version of the deck and that he did in his EBO version. I do think Rogue 3 with Wedge in it and another pilot, I guess in this case Blount, who doesn't have a whole lot of other options, would be really helpful. So overall I think still a solid deck and still relatively good base here. Lots of proficiency surprise. I hate the destiny on this. It's hard for me to use it, but potentially like killing Brangus immediately or the Emperor immediately or Vader immediately. Potentially, if you can get the destinies right, yeah, this makes a big difference. So profit main. So last year, Joe, he used a version of Speeders, which actually Johnny used Speeders this time too. But he opted this time to go more with kind of a main version. And so, like I mentioned before, what do profit decks love to do? Well, they love to abuse Master Luke, combined with this one, because Master Luke deploys for free to Jabba's palace. They love to deploy Master Luke and then deploy Obi-Wan and then a couple sabers and just kind of blow you away. And he had, the standard Fallen Portal. Fallen Portal works at, Tatooine Jabba's palace. It works at docking bays. It works everywhere except, audience chamber. But he doesn't plan to deploy the audience chamber until he's ready to pounce and ready to free Han. So yeah, someone who loves you 2 copies in this deck in order to get him. This particular time, he went with Lay with Blaster Rifle and he did not go with Bausch. No Bausch for him this time. This is a battle deck. What you basically want to do is you want to deploy Master Luke, you want to deploy Leia, you want to battle them, you want to free Han in the middle of battle, and I guess you could free them beforehand too. You want to free them at that point. Although it would technically be a little bit safer to deploy battle, although this deck does not have Draw Their Fire. It does not have Beggar. So, one of the concerns you have in a deck like this is you don't want Palpatine. Because what Palpatine will do is Palpatine will deploy to the audience chamber, and he will sit there, with Force Lightning. And what will happen is, as soon as you do, someone who loves you, he will Force Lightning, and he will Force Lightning your Han, and then Han will go away. And if you're really mean, you'll find a Bring Him Before Me deck that uses Young Fool, and then he'll instantly out of play that character. So that could be really mean. That could happen. I think in this game where Joe was playing, that's exactly what happened. I think no, actually, well, I think it happened the other way. It happened in the game when Johnny was playing that Joe put his Emperor and he Force Lightning Johnny, but we'll go to that game next. Uncontrollable Fury, because what do you notice about these decks? What do you notice about all these decks that we played? This deck is Vayrith Lightsaber. 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 Vayrith Lightsaber. Vayrith Lightsaber. Vayrith Lightsaber. None of these decks are using Lord Vader. None of them. Not a single one this time. Now, could that change? Could that be different? Could people change their minds? Yeah, people can change their minds. Some people got mad at me for saying, Lord Vader is extremely unpopular. I guess he's the second most popular one. I guess that's a more fair way to say it. But for sure, Vader Lightsaber, because EPPs are just too good, right? It's too good just to deploy Vader and just slap people. And obviously, you'd have Maul with Maul with double Vader Lightsaber is the kind of the worst version of this. He doesn't exist at this point in time. But yeah, it's just EPPs are really powerful. That's why we're experimenting with banning EPPs from Premier Death Star 2 Jawa to try to mix things up. But yeah, I think Wormtime, he likes to use Lord Vader with his saber. The disadvantage of sabers is that the light side loves to do weapon levitation, and then steal poor Lord Vader's lightsaber, and just sometimes it's nice to do that. But because everyone loves Vader lightsaber, that means Uncontrollable Fury is really good, and it can cost you the game, and that's the issue. So I think a lot of these choices are solid overall. A lot of the standard packages, a lot of this looks like a Dark Deal 44 style. He did add Visor Vision, like Dark Deal 44 toggle for previous match. That's good. Run Luke Run you can put Luke between, like you put like at the docking bay, and you can protect like maybe the other docking bay and the Jabba's Palace. Harksef can prevent battle drains, battle damage elsewhere. So yeah, a lot of the standard Prophet annoyingness dodge is extremely annoying to fight against. A lot of the standard Prophet annoyingness that you can deal with. 3 televisions, very frustrating. And yeah, the Wedge and the Rogue 3, very powerful combo. I am very vindicated. You can put Wedge in here, and you can put Harksef in here. So that can be extremely annoying. So from a deck construction point of view, I think this is overall pretty good. Grimtosh is nice. And the issue, of course, is it's very vulnerable to Han coming out. This is where Spaceport Docking Bay comes out, and you want to deploy that to another system. And that might be your only way to drain. So yeah, this is probably a good deck. It did get trounced, so because the other opponent was able to kind of deploy Emperor. In this particular case is because they got set for stunned. Set for stun combined with Ona, right? And that is a very cruel combo that works. Among other things, there is the Evazan. There's a standard Evazan and disarmed. Plus a Vader, or plus like a 4-bomb, whatever. That's another combo. I do think it is kind of pertinent that he put the regular Han Solo here. That way he can get the 10 force. and then he can deploy the heavy blaster pistol to later. Although hot heavy blaster pistol is better for Luke and kind of do a lot of damage. So I don't have a replay. I don't know who he played first. No Dark Deal doesn't have like two Hans, but I could see this as a potential one. And he had Keeble Optimus here as well. So for the final game, not the final one. We have one more after this one. Prophet Speeders. This is similar to the deck last time. I don't remember if Johnny had Trooper Sabak last time. Maybe did. Trooper Sabak is a good way to take advantage of Lando. And basically, whenever you get your maneuvering flaps out here, it can be very hard to challenge. You can rack up the power very quickly. Order to engage can make your opponent's life very difficult. If they battle you docking bay, you fall in portal. I mean, you can fall in portal them when they're trying to fight your snow speeder. So if you don't have a way to fight these snow speeders or sufficient drains in space, it can be very, 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 very difficult and annoying to fight this deck. Johnny Chu loves it's a trap. It's powerful, and yeah, if you are a ground-based deck, this can be potentially very frustrating for you. And the way to beat this deck, if you notice here, two Bausches, two someone who loves you. What does that mean that you need? Well, to beat this deck, what do you need? You want to have three senses. At least two, but ideally three, right? And that way they can never, love you. There's also a card that prevents spies from deploying. And let's see if we can find it. I'll do leader. Let's see, leader. There we go. Mr. Infant Mon. Yeah, Mr. Infant Mon means spawn spies again, otherwise may not deploy or move to the site. Well, if you get Infant Mon via the start text from Prophet, that means that you can start with two aliens. So that would mean that the only way for the opponent to get there would be Luke. So yeah, if you can get an Infant Mon there and you can stop Luke or something, and you can basically lock them out of the game, pretty much. If you can do that. Although it's harder on Infant Mon. Generally speaking, it's three senses plus having a whole crew of people hang out the audience chamber, and so they're never able to someone who loves you. Johnny has no Grimtosh in this particular version, so you could draw up to your heart's content, unless he changes it, of course. All right. So for the last one, we have Prophet Speeders. It's interesting to see, Brad switch up decks. People played this earlier in the year, and he's trying his own version of this. He has a couple of these ASPs to try to deploy quickly here. He doesn't really have protection from this lady right here. And I guess to be fair, neither did Johnny, and neither did Joe, right? Well, of course, Joe did. Yeah, Johnny didn't really have the protection of this lady, so potentially Monarch. I mean, the attempt is to try to have different types of speeders to avoid a Monarch. It doesn't always work, practically speaking, but it's definitely a non-zero vulnerability. And it's the same thing, whereas, the goal here is for him to deploy Bausch there, someone who loves you. And again, the counter to this is just to run a few senses and stack up the audience chamber and wait while you force drain and do damage somewhere else. I do like that he has on the edge to frustrate the opponent. I don't see a Sabak here. He's not trying to do that. It could be worse. A couple of things are as annoying. I do like, Fall the Legend is really good. Why is Fall the Legend good? Because it's another way to beat up on Lord Vader and make his life difficult, make him sad. Same thing, throw him in a charge. And yes, it stacks well with on the edge. And so, yeah, you could use on the edge in the middle. Then you could retrieve Han, including her on the edge, and you could use on the dead. So you could potentially use this like 3 times in your game without having to battle necessarily or lose it naturally. And so yeah, it can be very frustrating for the opponent to play. I'd say this is overall good. I think he has some of the tech that's annoying him. I think you probably want to try to Sabak in these games. I do appreciate that he has Grimtosh here. It looks like they have the same exact number. Like, looks like you just copy the number of same number of of speeders that Johnny had, and yeah, they both have civil disorders, so that's another way Civil Sword is another way to ping Brangus and make him sad. They have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So if you have 15 speeders plus maybe a couple of guys down and just hunker down, you could make Brangus very sad. And it might be, you might be able to win the drain race against him, potentially. Um, Biggest danger would Brangus be starting a battle with you here. So, and then he deploys more, more of the Emperor's Sword and Shield. So have to see that there, but overall good. So anyway, I think these are competitive decks. Interesting to see the way they think, and I think for the rest of you, think at a high level, and we'll do some more analysis later. So thank you much. Take care.